I do not know who is still out there, or who is still awake, or who is still bothering to turn a knob and hunt for a voice in all this noise, but I am here and the power is on for now. My name is Derris Kwon. I'm talking from the back of a bakery in eastern Idaho, in a part of town that used to smell normal at night. Yeast, sugar, warm flour, hot metal from ovens. Now it smells sharp and dry, and everything has a grit on it. If you are hearing me, you already know what happened, or you know enough to be scared. I am not a scientist. I am a night baker who got stuck in the middle of the biggest problem this country has ever had, and I am talking because silence is worse. I used to keep the radio on when I worked. Not for news, not even for music, just for company. Night work does that to you. It turns the world into a closed room where you and the mixers are the only moving things. I would come in a little after 10, unlock the side door, flick on the lights, and get started on the prep for the morning crew. I had a routine that made my body calm. Scale the flour, check the water temp, open the yeast bin, set the first sponge, wipe down the bench. The radio stayed on low in the corner with the same local talk and the same overnight updates that never mattered. Road closures, a wreck on the interstate, weather, sports, stuff that kept people feeling normal. That night started normal. It was a Tuesday going into Wednesday. The clock set a little after 11. I remember because I had just started a batch of cinnamon rolls and I was counting in my head, thinking about the proof time, thinking about how the morning rush would hit hard because the schools were open and the hospital cafeteria always ordered extra on Wednesdays. I had the dough hook turning, the radio mumbling, and then I felt the vibration in the floor that did not match the machines. The mixer was running smooth. The ovens were off at that point. The vibration was slow, heavy, and it came in a few pulses. I stopped what I was doing and just stood there with my hand on the metal table, waiting to see if it was a truck rolling by. There is a kind of thunder that rolls and fades. This was not that. This was deeper, and it did not fade right. It kept coming in a low push, then a break, then another push. It made the air inside the bakery feel pressurized for a second, then normal, then pressurized again. I walked to the back door, cracked it open, and listened. No sirens, no shouting, no cars. Just that dull sound far off to the east and north, too big to pin down. I closed the door and told myself it was something at the rail yard, or a storm on the plain. Then the radio cut out mid-sentence, dead air for a second. Then a clean voice came on, calm enough that it made my stomach tighten. The voice said there had been a major eruption in the Yellowstone region. It used the words significant ash, plume, and widespread airspace closures. It said residents in parts of Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and Utah should shelter indoors, limit travel, and prepare for extended disruption. It said the authorities were coordinating. It said the situation was being assessed. Then it switched into instructions that sounded printed. Not a person thinking, not a person reacting, a person reading. Keep doors and windows closed. Cover outside air intakes. Avoid driving in ash. Protect your lungs. Conserve fuel. Check on neighbors if it is safe. It did not say panic. It never says that. It said remain calm. I'm telling you straight. Remain calm does not calm anyone. It does the opposite. It is what you say when the plan is already written and the people talking have practiced it. It is what you say when the thing is bigger than the words. I stood there staring at the radio, listening to the calm voice, and I had this dumb thought that the person reading it probably had a cup of coffee and a warm building and a security badge and a door that locked. I was in a bakery in Idaho Falls with flour on my hands and an old generator out back that we used for outages. That was my safety net. I tried my phone. The first call went through to my sister in Boise, and she answered on the second ring with a shaky hello that made my chest go tight. She said she had been watching a live feed earlier, then it cut. She said the sky over Boise was still clear for now. She said people were already stripping shelves at grocery stores, even down there. She asked where I was. I said I was at work, and I did not plan to leave. She told me I was insane. I told her I had heat and food and a generator. I told her I would call again in an hour. Then the call dropped mid-sentence and the phone went to one bar, then none, then back to one, then none again. The first ash did not fall in big flakes. It started as a dust that you could only see under the parking lot lights. I went outside with a flashlight and aimed it through the air. The beam showed tiny specks drifting down slow, then drifting sideways, then down again. I wiped my finger on the hood of my car and felt grit. Not sand, finer than that. It stuck in the lines of my skin. I walked back inside fast and shut the door with my shoulder. A bakery is not airtight. It is designed to breathe, to vent heat, to pull fresh air in while ovens are running. That is great in normal life. In ash, it is a problem. I went through the building and shut what I could. I turned off the rooftop intake fans. I taped plastic over a vent in the back office that always whistled in winter. I wet a stack of old towels and shoved them at the base of the front door. I grabbed the box of disposable gloves and put a pair on so I would stop rubbing grit into my eyes without thinking. My brain went straight into work mode. Task to task. Fix the next thing. Do not stand still. The radio kept talking. It switched between official bulletins and callers. The official part still sounded controlled. The callers sounded human. A guy out by Rexburg said ash was already coating the road and his truck was coughing. A woman in West Yellowstone said it looked dark at noon and her kid was wheezing. Someone in Pocatello said the interstate was jammed and people were abandoning cars. A nurse called from Idaho Falls and said the emergency department had already started seeing respiratory patients, and the waiting room was filling. The host tried to keep order, but the lines were chaos. The same questions over and over. How long? Where to go? What mask? What water? What happens to power? I stopped thinking about cinnamon rolls. I stopped thinking about the morning rush. I kept working because moving kept me from spiraling. But the work changed. I started pulling inventory. Flour, sugar, salt, shortening, yeast, canned fillings. The walk-in cooler had butter, eggs, milk, and a bunch of sandwich stuff for the deli side. We had bottled water cases for the front display. We had paper cups, plastic utensils, a big stack of napkins. We had propane for a small backup heater, and we had the main ovens that ran on natural gas. I checked the gas line and wondered how long that would last if the city pressure dropped or the valve stations got clogged. The generator mattered most. It was a diesel unit behind the building in a metal cage, big enough to keep the lights and mixers on during normal storms. We kept a fuel tank on site that the supplier topped off every month. I went out with a headlamp and checked the gauge. It was around 3/4. That sounds comforting until you do the math in a world where deliveries stop. I did not know the exact gallons, but I knew the burn rate from past outages. If I ran it hard, it would drain fast. If I ran it only for essentials, I could stretch it. Stretch it into what, though? Days, weeks, months. That was when the word winter started to mean something else in my head. Around 1 a.m, the first person showed up at the front door. A guy in a hoodie, ash already on his shoulders, carrying a backpack. He knocked hard, then kept knocking. I did not open right away. I stood behind the glass and watched his hands. No weapon visible. He looked scared, not angry. I cracked the door enough to talk. He said his car died on the highway. He said it stalled and would not restart. He said he had been trying doors and most businesses were dark. He asked if I had water. I looked past him and saw the streetlights turning the air into a fog of grit. I let him in. His name was Mark. He was headed from Bozeman down to Salt Lake for a job interview that did not matter anymore. He had a mild cough already and his eyes were pink. I gave him water and told him to rinse his face at the sink. I gave him a clean apron to cover his mouth and nose. An apron is not a mask, it is cloth. It helps a little with the big particles, not the fine stuff. It was all I had in that moment that I could hand over without losing my mind. Within another hour, 3 more people came. A woman with an inhaler and a kid around 10 who kept rubbing his chest. An older man with a knit cap pulled low and ash in his eyebrows. A teenage girl who looked tough until she started crying as soon as the door shut behind her. They all said the same thing with different words. Cars were dying. Visibility was dropping. People were leaving vehicles in the lanes and walking. The cell network was getting spotty. No one knew where to go. I did not make a speech. I did not do the heroic thing. I just did what I do. I fed people. I turned on the ovens and started baking whatever would keep. Bread, rolls, anything dense that could be portioned. I set up a table in the lobby with water cups and napkins. I told people to sit down, breathe slow, stop going outside unless needed. I made rules in my head and spoke them out loud without ceremony. No one goes out alone. No one touches the generator. No one lights anything near the fuel cage. No one starts a fight in my building. In normal life, I'm not that guy. That night I became that guy because somebody had to. The power flickered around 3 a.m. Lights dimmed, came back, dimmed again. The mixers made a sad noise and slowed. Then everything cut. The ovens died mid-heat. The radio went silent. The building felt wrong without the hum. People started talking at once, questions overlapping. I walked to the back, flipped the transfer switch, and went outside to start the generator. The air hit my throat even with my mouth covered. It was not just ash falling. It was ash suspended, fine enough that it sat there and moved with every breath of wind. The generator took 2 tries. The first crank failed, the second caught and rumbled, and I felt relief so sharp it made my eyes water. I shut the cage, locked it, and ran back inside. Lights came back in a stagger. Some outlets dead, some live. The radio came back with a burst of static, then a voice again. People clapped. That made me uncomfortable, so I told them to stop wasting energy on clapping and go drink water. The next sunrise did not look right. I am not talking about pretty disaster sky stuff. I mean the light came up weak and dirty. The streetlights shut off on their timer and it still looked dim. The bakery windows were covered in a film. Outside, every car had a layer of gray. The road lines were fading under it. I opened the back door a crack and saw the parking lot had drifts forming in the corners where wind pushed it. Not snow, ash, but it piled the same way when the wind caught it. The radio said the main eruption had happened hours earlier, and that additional activity was expected. It said ashfall would continue. It said to avoid driving because ash can clog air filters, damage engines, and reduce visibility to near zero. That part was true. I had already seen it through Mark and the others. It said airports were closed across large sections of the country. It said the federal government had activated emergency plans. It said shelters were opening where possible. It said distribution of critical supplies would be coordinated. It never said how. It never said when. One of the women in my lobby, her name was Carissa, said she worked at the grocery distribution center on the edge of town. She said the intake fans on the big warehouse system had seized overnight. She said ash got past the screens, caked the filters, and then the motors overheated. She said the managers tried to keep the conveyors running, but visibility inside the building dropped because the ash came in every door and every gap. She said the building's fire alarms kept tripping and people were coughing so hard they were throwing up. She said the center shut down and sent everyone home, and then half the workforce could not even start cars to leave. That right there is what people mean when they say supply chain. It is not a fancy thing. It is fans and filters and trucks and drivers and forklifts and people who show up for a shift. Ash attacks all of it. It ruins moving parts. It turns lubrication into grit paste. It makes breathing hurt. It makes a normal job turn dangerous fast. That day, people still talked about this being temporary. A few days, some guy on the radio said. A week, another said. I heard those words and I did not believe them. Not because I had secret knowledge, because the sky was already gray at breakfast and the stuff was still falling. By the second day, the bakery turned into a shelter without anyone voting on it. People kept arriving. Some came in pairs, some alone. A man in a reflective vest said he had been directing traffic until his cruiser died and his radio stopped working. A young mom with 2 toddlers asked for somewhere warm. A guy with a beard and a hunting rifle slung over his shoulder tried to walk in and act confident. I stopped him at the door and told him the rifle stayed pointed down and it stayed off the table. He looked annoyed. Then he looked at the room full of families and tired faces, and he nodded and followed the rule. That is what the first days were. People still had enough of their old life in them to follow basic rules. The biggest issue became air, not food, not even water at first. Air. The fine ash got in anyway. It found cracks I did not know existed. You could wipe the counter and an hour later, there would be a fresh film. People were coughing in their sleep. The kid with the inhaler was wheezing more, and his mother was trying to stay calm and failing. I found our box of cheap dust masks that we used for cleaning flour bins. They were not designed for this. I handed them out anyway because something is better than nothing. I also started rotating people through the back dish area where there was a better sink and less draft, making them rinse their faces and spit out the grit. It helped morale more than lungs, but morale mattered. I tried to improve the building's filtration the only way I could. I took bakery cloth, the thick cotton we used for proofing, and I layered it over the vent openings inside. I did not pretend it was magic. I told people the truth. It would catch larger particles, it would slow down the worst of it, and it would make the air a little less harsh. Fine ash still gets through. Anyone telling you an apron turns your lungs safe is lying or clueless. I kept the cloth damp because damp cloth catches more particles. Damp cloth also grows nasty stuff if you never dry it. So I rotated it, washed it, dried it when I could, and kept doing the work. On day 3, the city water started tasting wrong. Not poison, not gasoline. Just off. Metallic, dusty. The radio mentioned precautionary water advisories and told people to let tap water run clear before use. That made me laugh once, short and bitter. Because nothing was going to run clear if ash was falling into every reservoir and settling into every system. I started using bottled water for the kid and for anyone who was already sick. For everyone else, I set up food-grade buckets, filled them from the tap, and let the water sit so sediment could drop. Then I boiled it in big stock pots on the gas range and cooled it covered. Boiling does not remove ash particles. Settling and careful pouring helps. It still was not perfect. It was what we had. News came in fragments. Some of it was official. Some of it was people talking on air with shaky voices. Some of it was what I could pull from distant signals when I turned the dial at night and listened past the local chatter. I heard a county official somewhere south saying evacuation routes were limited because vehicles were failing. I heard a hospital administrator in Wyoming talking about oxygen shortages and people coming in with lungs full of fine particles. I heard a truck dispatcher say his entire fleet had shut down in multiple states because engine filters were clogged and replacement filters were gone. I heard a meteorologist mention stratospheric ash and sulfur aerosols and say the temperature drop was not going to be a weekend problem. He said it could last years. People in my lobby did not want years. People wanted a date. People wanted a plan that ended. I watched faces change when the word years landed. Some people got angry. Some people shut down. Some people got busy because busy is easier than thinking. I got busy. I started doing survival math out loud so others would join in. How many loaves can I bake with what flour we have? How long can we run the generator if we only power the fridge and the radio and a few lights? How much water can we boil in a day with the gas pressure we have right now? How many people can sleep inside without everyone breathing the same dirty air all night? We cleared space. We moved tables. We dragged the big trash bins out and washed them and used them for water storage. We took every spare blanket from the bakery's tiny office closet and from people's cars, even though the cars were dying, and we set up sleeping spots along the walls. I told people the front doors stayed locked unless someone was actively coming in. We made a sign that said in plain marker, "If you come in, cover your mouth, and do not bring fighting in here." That sign did not stop everyone. It helped with the ones who still had shame. Around the end of the first week, the local radio voice started sounding tired. The host stopped taking as many calls. The official bulletins repeated more. Temporary disruption. Critical resources are being mobilized. Please conserve heat. Do not travel. Then one afternoon, the signal cut mid-bulletin and did not come back for a long time. When it did, it was weaker and full of static. That was when it hit me that even radio depends on fuel. Generators need diesel. Diesel needs trucks. Trucks need roads you can see and engines that breathe. So I started talking more. At first, I was only talking to the room, reading whatever I heard, translating the official language into plain words. Telling people this means do not expect a resupply. Telling people this means hospitals are full. Telling people this means stop hoping your boss will call. Then I realized something else. People were passing my words to others outside. A guy would leave for an hour to check on his dad and come back saying, "I told him what you said about the roads." A woman would come back from the apartment complex across the street and say, "People over there are listening to you through the door." It turned into a thing without permission. We rigged a small speaker by the front window so I could talk toward the street without opening the door. It was not fancy. It was a powered speaker we used for weekend events when the bakery hosted local music. I plugged a microphone into it, taped the cable down, and stood there twice a day giving updates. Morning and evening, what I heard, what I saw, what supplies we had, what rules we were using. If someone outside asked for help, I told him to speak through the glass and stay back from the door. It felt cold, but ash makes disease travel easy, and panic makes people do stupid things. If this place turned into a crowd crush at the door, we would lose it. The cold came earlier than it should have. That is not a feeling. That is measurable. The temperature dropped fast and stayed low, even when the calendar said it was not time yet. The sun was there some days, but its heat was weak through the haze. Crops and fields outside town started to fail. Not all at once, but enough that farmers stopped talking big and started calling relatives and asking about fuel and feed. People with wood stoves got smug for a day, then they realized wood only lasts if you can cut it and haul it and keep your lungs working while you do. Ash gets into everything. Chainsaw filters, tractor radiators, your mouth. I heard someone on a distant broadcast mention the Tambora eruption in 1815. He said it caused the year without a summer. He said frost hit crops in places that should have been warm. He said people moved and starved and fought. He said this event was bigger. I did not know if that was true. I am not there measuring volcanic output. I just knew Idaho was choking and the light had turned weak, and my bakery was full of people who were starting to understand there was no quick exit. Respiratory illness turned into the quiet killer. Not dramatic, not movie stuff, just lungs getting inflamed and never catching up. The kid, Eli, that was his name, got worse even with the inhaler. His mother, Jenna, looked at me one morning and asked if I thought he needed a hospital. I told her the truth. I did not know if the hospital could take him. I did not know if the trip would kill the last bit of his breathing strength, because going outside meant ash in his airway. A man in our group who had worked as an emergency medical technician before this said oxygen was already limited at the hospital and the waiting room was packed. Jenna cried without sound for a minute. Then she wiped her face and asked me to help set up a cleaner corner for Eli. So we did. We put him near the back room where the air was slightly better, and we kept a pot of hot water steaming lightly to add humidity. Humid air helps some people breathe easier. It also helps mold grow if you are careless. Everything in this mess is trade-offs. People started going out on foot with goggles and layered cloth over their faces, doing quick runs to nearby buildings for supplies. Not raids, not violence, mostly. Grocery stores had already been hit hard, and a lot of the cold items rotted when power failed. Pharmacies got stripped fast, and I do not blame anyone who grabbed what kept his family alive. We did the boring scavenging. Batteries, blankets, medical tape, saline, trash bags, water jugs. We found a box of proper particulate respirators in a maintenance closet at an office building across the street, the kind meant for wildfire smoke. We treated that box like gold. We gave them to the sick and to anyone who had to go out. The first real conflict happened in the second week. A man I did not know well, name was Ron, started telling people that this bakery was his assigned shelter, because he said he had military family and he knew how things worked. He wanted control of the food and control of who slept where. He wanted the generator key, even though there is no key, it is just a switch. He tried to frame it as leadership. It was not. It was fear wearing a tough face. I did not solve it with a speech. I solved it with numbers and backup. I told Ron the generator stays controlled by the person who maintains it, and that person was me. I told Ron the food stays in the open where everyone can see the portions. I told Ron the moment he tried to take something by force, he would get put outside. Then I looked at the room and asked who agreed. Hands went up. Not all of them, but enough. Ron stared at the hands and backed down. He spent that night sitting alone near the door with his jaw tight. The next day he left with 2 others and did not come back. That was the first time I felt the building get a little safer, because one person with a control problem walked away. Around day 20, the rumors about shelters started. People kept saying there were heated facilities being set up down in Utah. People said there were convoys heading to Boise. People said the National Guard had set up distribution points along major highways. Then I heard a transmission late one night, a tired official voice speaking to another official voice, not meant for public ears, admitting convoys had turned back because vehicles were failing and ash was choking engines even on newer trucks with fresh filters. He said they were prioritizing critical nodes, and that meant some towns would not get help. He did not say it cold. He said it exhausted, which was worse. That is when I stopped pretending this was just sheltering in place until the roads cleared. The roads were not going to clear fast. Ash does not melt. Rain turns it into paste. Wind lifts it again. Plows push it into piles that drift back. Engines that run in it need constant filter changes, and nobody had a warehouse full of filters for every vehicle in the region. That is the part people miss when they imagine escape. Even if the road is empty, your car needs clean air to run. We started making longer plans. We set up a ration schedule. We built the simple rule set that everyone could repeat without drama. 1. Nobody wastes water. 2. Nobody burns fuel for comfort. 3. Nobody goes out without a mask and eye protection. 4. Nobody brings strangers inside without the group agreeing. 5. Anyone who gets sick gets monitored and moved to the cleaner corner. We also picked jobs: cleaning, baking, water boiling, door watch, radio listening. A woman named Lila, who had been a school librarian, started writing everything down in a notebook. Names, dates, what we heard, what we did. She said someone would want a record if this ever ended. I told her I hoped she was right. The bakery ovens became our heat backbone. Natural gas stayed on longer than I expected. That surprised me. The city must have had enough pressure and enough staff keeping the system stable. When gas stayed steady, I baked in waves, not non-stop. Enough to cook and heat the building, then shut down and conserve. The smell of bread kept people from going fully feral. That sounds small. It is not. Smell is one of the last things that makes your brain believe life is still human. By the end of the first month, daylight felt short even when the clock said it should be longer. We were not getting normal blue sky days. The air stayed gray. Sometimes it thinned enough that you could see the sun as a bright circle. It did not feel warm on your skin. We started sleeping more. Not because we were lazy, because there was less to do outside and more reason to conserve energy. Phone service died in pieces. First texts stopped going out. Then calls. Then even emergency alerts stopped. The towers have backup batteries and some have generators, but again, fuel runs out. The internet died too. For a while we could pull a few news pages when the signal came back, then nothing. Radio became the only consistent thread. Not clean, not reliable, but present. A voice at night. A warning, a rumor, a truth slipping through static. That is when I started sending my voice farther than the front window. One of the guys in the group, his name was Hector, had a two-way radio set up from his old job with search and rescue. He kept it in his truck, and his truck was dead now, so he carried it in. He had a battery pack and a small antenna. He used it at first to listen, then he suggested we try transmitting short updates. Not to play hero, just to let anyone out there know this building existed and that we had heat on certain hours. He told me not to use names, not to give exact details that would attract the wrong kind of attention, and to keep it short. So I did. I keyed the mic and said, "Bakery building near the industrial strip in Idaho Falls has heat during morning and evening. Water is limited. If you are on foot and you can handle ash, approach slow and stay back from doors. No fighting." Then I let go and listened. Nothing came back at first. Then after a few tries over a couple of nights, a voice answered from somewhere north. A man, rough breathing, saying he had a small group sheltering in a warehouse and he was running out of masks. He asked if we had medical supplies. I told him we had limited stock and he should not travel unless necessary. He asked anyway. I said I would trade if he could bring sealed water and a spare fuel can. He laughed once and said fuel cans were empty everywhere. Then his transmission cut. That interaction changed something in me. It made the crisis feel wider. Not just my room. It made me feel responsible in a way I did not ask for. If my voice could reach anyone, even one person, then staying silent felt wrong. I started doing a short broadcast twice a day over the two-way setup, morning and night, what the sky looked like, whether the power grid was still out, whether gas was on, whether we heard any official updates. I kept it plain. No panic, no false hope, just information. We also started hearing more unfiltered truth. Not conspiracy nonsense, not aliens, not drama. Just exhausted people admitting the system was failing. A hospital worker somewhere west said they were out of oxygen cylinders and using shared concentrators, rotating patients. A county road supervisor said ash was destroying equipment and they had stopped plowing because it was pointless. A National Guard voice came over one night with a short directive that sounded internal, saying distribution priorities had shifted to regional hubs, and smaller towns should expect no deliveries for the foreseeable future. He said it in military time once, effective 0600, then corrected himself and kept going. That was the first time I heard a uniform voice slip out of script on air. It meant the stress was cracking even the trained people. 2 months in, we started losing people. Not in a dramatic way. In a slow way that makes you angry because you cannot fight it. Carissa's older father, who had been sheltering with us, developed a deep cough and fever. We kept him warm, kept him hydrated, tried to keep his air clean, but his lungs sounded wet and tight. He died in his sleep one night. We did not have a proper way to handle bodies, and ash outside made burial hard. The ground was starting to freeze too. We wrapped him in plastic and blankets, said quiet words, and moved him to the coldest corner of the back storage where the temperature stayed low. That felt wrong and necessary at the same time. We told ourselves we would do something better later. Later kept shrinking. Jenna decided to try the hospital with Eli after his breathing got too bad. Hector and the emergency medical technician volunteered to go with her, because going alone was dangerous. They wore the best masks we had and goggles. They took a wagon with blankets and water. They left at mid-morning and came back late afternoon. Eli was not with them. Jenna walked in with her eyes hollow, held onto the door frame, and slid down. The emergency medical technician told me the hospital had turned into triage tents inside hallways. He said the staff were working but overwhelmed. He said Eli got oxygen for a while, but his lungs could not recover. He died on a cot with his mother holding his hand. Jenna did not speak for 2 days. Then she started helping in the kitchen again because work kept her upright. That is the real cost of this. Not just ash and fuel, time. Time grinding people down until even the strong ones start moving slower. Arguments start over small things. Someone taking an extra roll, someone using too much water to wash hair, someone turning on a light for comfort. You have to stop those arguments early or they turn into a fight that breaks your group. I became stricter. I hated that version of me. It still showed up every day. Outside, the town got quieter. You would expect sirens, chaos, constant noise. It did not stay that way. The first week had alarms and distant shouting sometimes. After that, engines stopped and the streets turned into ash-coated lanes with abandoned vehicles half buried at the edges. People traveled on foot in the early weeks, then less and less because breathing outside hurt. The ones who stayed outside too long got sick. The ones who tried to run generators without good maintenance burned them out. You could smell failed engines sometimes, a bitter burnt oil smell that drifted through the ash. Then it would fade, and you would realize another building had gone dark. Food became the next hard wall. Flour kept us alive for a while because flour is calories and bread is efficient. We also ate through the deli stock. Then through the vending machines we raided from nearby offices. Then through whatever canned food people had brought. We started trading with another small group that sheltered in a tire shop 2 blocks away. They had canned goods and some propane. We had bread and heat. We kept the trades clean in public, no private deals. Private deals rot groups. We also started a small indoor growing setup with what we could find. Not a fantasy farm, just trays of sprouts in the warmest back room, using soaked beans and lentils scavenged from a health store. Sprouts give some nutrients and break the monotony. We used minimal water and reused trays. It was not enough to feel full. It was enough to keep people from feeling dead already. The weather reports, when we could get them, turned grim. Temperatures in the region stayed below normal. Snow did come eventually, and it mixed with ash and made a heavy slush that clogged boots and froze into crust. The ash that had settled on rooftops turned into a weight problem. A warehouse down the street had a partial roof collapse. We heard it in the middle of the night, a deep crack, and then a long rumble. In the morning you could see the sag. That made everyone look up more. Every building turned into a question. How much weight is on the roof? How much longer before it gives? We cleared ash off our roof as best we could during periods when the air thinned. We did it with masks and goggles and short shifts. Shovel, scrape, rest. Shovel, scrape, rest. You do not want to breathe hard in this air. You want slow, controlled effort. Even then, people came back coughing. We kept a bucket of water at the door to rinse faces and hands. Ash is abrasive. It eats your skin raw if you keep rubbing. Through all of this, the most dangerous moments were not outside. The dangerous moments were inside, when the generator hiccuped or the gas pressure dropped. One evening, around dinner, the lights flickered and the generator made a grinding sound, then stabilized. Everyone froze. You could feel fear ripple without anyone saying it. I went outside with Hector, opened the cage, and checked the filters and intake. Ash had built up again. Even with cloth covers and careful sealing, ash finds the intake. We cleaned it, swapped what we could, and promised each other we would not run it any more than needed. That was when I started reducing broadcast time. I hated doing it, but fuel is fuel, heat is life. We went from 2 transmissions a day to 1. We chose evening because people outside move more at dusk when the air sometimes settles and visibility improves slightly. I kept it short. Bakery has limited heat, limited water. Do not drive. If you are sick, stay sheltered and protect your lungs. If you have sealed water or medical supplies to trade, approach slow, then silence again. Some nights I heard a voice that claimed there were shelters in southern Idaho with working power and clean air. He kept insisting it. He kept saying safe zones and controlled access. He never explained how the air was clean. He never explained fuel. He never explained filtration scale. He sounded excited, almost proud. That made me suspicious. Clean air in this environment takes serious filtration, sealed space, power to run fans, and maintenance. It is possible in certain facilities. It is not something a random group holds without planning. I heard another voice, quieter, that sounded more believable. A woman said she was in a county building with a basement and they were sealing rooms with plastic and running a small fan with a proper filter scavenged from a medical office. She said it helped. She said it was still hard. She said 2 people had already died from lung problems. She said anyone traveling should understand that the road itself can kill you. Not because of bandits, not because of monsters, just because ash plus exertion plus cold equals respiratory collapse. That matched what I saw. When a person comes in from outside after walking 2 miles in ash, that person is bent forward, coughing, eyes red, shoulders coated, voice strained. That person needs water and rest and time. If that person had tried to do 10 miles, the person might not make it. That is the basic trap in the shelter rumor game. The distance between you and the shelter can be the death zone. Still, people kept asking me about leaving. Derris, should we go south? Derris, should we try Boise? Derris, should we find family? I told them the same thing every time. If you have a clear destination with verified heat and verified clean air, and you can reach it on foot in short stages with indoor stops, maybe. If you are gambling on a rumor, you are trading a known shelter for a possible grave. I did not say it to scare anyone. I said it because the ash does not care about hope. Then the fuel supplier stopped answering. I had been calling every few days, leaving short messages, not begging, just asking status. That company used to deliver diesel and propane all over this part of the state. The phone rang and rang. Then it went to a full voicemail box. Then it did not ring at all. It just failed. I tried a different number. Same thing. I asked a guy in our group who had worked logistics to try his contacts. Nothing. We listened on air for any mention of fuel distribution. The official bulletins shifted language. They stopped saying distribution will be coordinated and started saying conserve all fuel reserves. That is the quiet admission. No refill is coming. The next night, the official voice came on one more time. Weaker signal, more static, and it gave one final message that sounded older than it should have, as if it had been recorded and replayed. It said residents should remain sheltered, conserve heat, limit movement, and prepare for extended winter conditions. It said, do not expect rapid restoration of services. Then there was a long pause. Then nothing, not even static for a while. Just dead air. I sat there staring at the radio, waiting for it to come back, waiting for some human voice to fill the gap. The bakery around me was quiet except for breathing and the distant low rumble of the generator. I walked out to the front window and looked at the street. The ash outside was thick enough that your footprints stayed. The abandoned cars looked half buried now. The sky was a dull gray, no clear stars. The temperature had dropped again, and the cold had a dry bite that made your throat feel smaller. I stood there and thought about months, not days. Months of rationing fuel and watching people get weaker. Months of clearing the roof and boiling water and listening for any voice. The choice in front of me is simple to say and hard to live. Stay here, fortify what we have, run the generator only when needed, bake only when gas is stable, keep the group small enough to feed, keep the rules tight, and ride out whatever this winter is going to be. Or take the risk and move. Ash-choked roads, failing engines, cold, unknown shelters, unknown crowds, unknown disease load, unknown violence. Hope on one side, control on the other. Both come with a cost. I am not going to dress this up. Part of me wants to stay because I know this building. I know every switch and every leak and every supply corner. I know how to keep people fed with flour and heat. Another part of me wants to leave because staying feels slow and heavy and final. Leaving feels active. It feels like doing something instead of waiting for the next loss. I said that out loud to myself first, then I shut my mouth because the room was quiet and people were listening even when nobody pretended to. The group had settled into a routine by then. Night watch by the front windows. Water pots on rotation. Bread bake on the days when gas pressure held. Cloth filters rinsed and rehung. A notebook on the counter with names and counts and who ate what. Nobody called it leadership, but people looked at me when something needed a yes or a no. I hated that. I also kept doing it because the alternative was everyone making separate choices inside the same building. That gets people killed. Hector waited until I finished my evening update on the mic. Then he stepped close and kept his voice low. He said the tire shop group had sent a runner. The runner said somebody had tried to break into the tire shop the previous night. Not a polite knock. Crowbar at the back door. When the tire shop guys shouted, the crowbar person ran. The runner said the town was shifting. The first month had been fear. The second month had been need. Need turns into theft, then violence, then people acting ahead of hunger so hunger does not catch him first. Mark overheard and joined in. Mark kept trying to be useful. He cleaned. He hauled buckets. He went out on short runs when I needed an extra set of lungs. Mark also watched the street too much, staring through the ash haze, looking for moving shapes. Mark said he had seen two people pulling a cart down the road at dawn, and one person dropped, then stood back up slow. Mark said the person moved wrong. Not sick wrong, exhausted wrong. Mark said nobody helped because nobody wanted to open doors. That felt real. Jenna sat at a table near the back wall, quiet and folded into herself. Jenna still worked when somebody asked. Jenna still boiled water when it was her turn. Jenna stopped smiling. When I walked past, Jenna looked up and asked me one question that hit harder than yelling. Jenna asked if staying here was going to turn into waiting to die. I did not answer fast. I did not have a clean answer. That night I called a meeting without calling it that. I told everyone to sit closer, keep voices down, and listen. I said the truth without dressing it up. The fuel in the tank was finite. The gas line might fail without warning. The roof needed clearing more often because ash plus snow had started sticking instead of blowing off. The water pressure had dropped twice in the last week. The radio had gone quiet more often. I said the bakery was still one of the better shelters in town because it had thick walls, food, and a generator. I also said the bakery could turn into a trap if fuel ran out and the air got worse and nobody had a backup. I laid out options. Option 1, stay and tighten down. Reduce the group count by helping some people move to other buildings where a smaller group could survive without draining one fuel tank. Option 2, take a scouting trip toward the rumored heated facilities down south. Not a full move, just a check. Option 3, go north toward Rexburg, where some people claimed the county had opened a big shelter. Option 4, abandon the idea of shelters and get outside town into a farm outbuilding or a potato cellar, where air could be controlled better with fewer openings. Nobody loved any option. That part made me feel less crazy. A few people got hopeful on the shelter talk, but the hope looked thin, more desperate than confident. The older man, Earl, who had been sleeping near the walk-in cooler, said he had lived through hard winters in Montana, and he did not trust crowds. Earl said crowds turn supplies into fights. Earl said he would rather freeze with 5 people than get stabbed in a gym with 50. Earl had a blunt way of saying things. People laughed once, then stopped because it did not feel funny. Hector asked me to be specific. Hector wanted a plan that did not depend on rumors. Hector said fuel was the hinge. Hector said if we could secure even one more diesel source, we could buy weeks or months. Hector said the abandoned semis on the interstate were still sitting there and some still had fuel in the tanks. Hector said the risk was lungs and visibility in conflict with anyone else who got there first. Hector said it still might be worth doing because losing the generator meant losing the radio and losing control of heat. I did not argue. I had been thinking the same thing and hating myself for it. Stealing fuel from abandoned trucks in Ashfall sounded insane 2 months earlier. 2 months earlier, I also thought the world would fix itself in a week. Reality changed the rules. We picked a small team for a fuel run. Me, because I knew the generator and the tank fittings. Hector, because he had the best head for risk. Mark, because he could move fast and he had been steady. Lila volunteered, then I said no. Lila was the record keeper and the calm voice in the room. I needed Lila here. The former emergency medical technician, his name was Leon, insisted on coming because Leon said the ash had started triggering asthma attacks and panic collapses outside. Leon said somebody needed to carry basic medical gear. I said yes, even though I wanted fewer bodies in the open. We prepared the night before. We laid out the respirators we had and matched them to faces that needed them most. The fuel run team got the best masks and the best goggles. We wrapped spare cloth around necks and wrists to keep ash off skin. We packed water in sealed bottles, not cups. We packed a hand pump and clear tubing from the bakery maintenance shelf. We packed a wrench and a small funnel. We packed 2 clean 5-gallon jugs with tight caps, plus a larger drum we could roll in a cart. We also packed a small fire extinguisher because diesel spills plus generators plus nervous people make a bad mix. I told the group inside the bakery what to do if we did not return by dusk. Shut down the generator early. Lock the doors. Do not go looking. Nobody argued with that. Everyone looked tired enough to accept reality without drama. We left just after mid-morning, timing it for a window when the ashfall eased slightly. The sky was still gray, but visibility had improved enough to see the end of the block. That counted as good conditions now. We moved slow and kept the cart between us, using it as a gear platform and a barrier. Every breath through the respirator felt dry. The mask sucked slightly against my face with each inhale, which meant it was sealing. It also meant my lungs worked harder. The town looked abandoned and busy at the same time. No cars moved, no engines ran. Footprints and cart tracks crisscrossed the ash. Doors that had been closed earlier were hanging open in places, flapping when wind shifted. Somebody had sprayed a message on a storefront in black paint, big block letters, warning people not to enter because there was sickness inside. I did not stop to read it closely. I kept moving. The interstate on-ramp was half blocked by stalled vehicles. Some had doors open, seats empty, ash piled on dashboards. A few had frost on windows from the night cold. We stepped around them, careful not to kick up ash. Leon pointed out something that made my stomach tighten. The fine ash had mixed with meltwater and turned into a thin paste in low spots. Paste sticks to boots, then hardens, then makes feet heavy. Heavy feet slow a person down and make breathing harder. Leon told us to step on the higher dry ash whenever possible. We found the first semis a little past a bend where the highway dipped. The trucks were angled weird, some jackknifed, some simply stopped and left. One trailer door had been forced open and cartons were scattered across the lane, soaked, then frozen, then dusted with ash. A box of cereal had burst open and flakes were plastered to the pavement. That made me think about how fast food becomes trash when transport dies. The trucks were supposed to be lifelines. Now the trucks were monuments. Hector checked the area before we got close to any fuel tank. He scanned with binoculars, slow sweep, then he put them down and listened. The soundscape was weird. No engines, no distant traffic. Just wind and the faint creak of metal settling. We heard a human voice once, far off, then it vanished. That made my skin go tight under my jacket. People were out here. We chose a semi that looked untouched. The cab door was closed, the tank cap still had a seal wire on it, which meant no one had opened it since the truck stopped. That did not guarantee fuel. It meant we were first or nobody bothered. Hector and Mark stood lookout while Leon and I worked. I climbed onto the step, cracked the cap carefully, and smelled diesel. That smell hit through the respirator, faint but present. Relief came in hard. The hand pump squeaked. My gloves slipped on the tubing. Diesel ran slow at first, then steady. The first jug filled in minutes. The second jug filled, then the drum. The drum took longer. The cart got heavier. The time outside stretched. My lungs started feeling tight from the work. Leon told me to slow down and breathe controlled. Leon watched my hands in the hose, checking for spills. Diesel on ash turns the surface slick and nasty. A slip out here could mean a cracked rib and no hospital. We were halfway through the drum when someone shouted from behind. Not close, but not far. Hector lifted a hand, palm down, signaling freeze. I froze with the hose in my hand. Mark turned first, then Hector. 3 people walked into view between 2 trailers. 2 men and 1 woman, all wearing layered cloth over faces, all carrying weapons. 1 man had a shotgun, the other had a pistol. The woman had a hatchet tucked in her belt and her hands were empty, which meant the hatchet was a choice, not a tool. The trio did not sprint. The trio walked slow and confident. That meant the trio had done this before. The shotgun man called out and told us to step away from the truck. He said fuel was his group's supply. He said he had people waiting. He said if we wanted to live, we would roll the drum over and walk away. His voice sounded strained through cloth, but steady. He did not sound excited. He sounded tired and hard. That scared me more. Hector kept his hands visible. Hector said we were taking fuel to keep a shelter running. Hector said we could trade bread and water. The pistol man laughed once. The pistol man said bread did not run a generator. The woman took a step forward and pointed at our cart. She told us to move. I looked at the drum. I looked at the half-filled jug. I looked at Hector. Hector gave a small head shake, not even a full no, more a warning. Leon was breathing hard. Mark's shoulders were tight. Nobody wanted a gunfight on a highway covered in ash with limited visibility and freezing air. A bullet wound out here would be a death sentence for whoever got hit. I made a decision that felt ugly. I shut the pump valve, capped the hose, and stepped back. I told the trio we would leave the drum. I also said we were taking the 2 jugs. I said the jugs were already filled and the drum was not. I said the trio could keep the truck and the drum and anything else in the area. I said if the trio wanted the jugs too, the trio would have to shoot us for them, and the trio would still be stuck out here with one more problem. The shotgun man stared. The shotgun man looked at the pistol man, then back to us. The pistol man raised his pistol a little higher. The woman stared at my hands, then at Leon, then at Mark. The woman said 1 jug, not 2. Hector answered before I could. Hector said 1 jug meant our shelter died, then more people would be out here scavenging and fighting. Hector said 2 jugs meant 1 shelter stayed stable and 1 less group would come looking for the trio's stash later. Hector said we would also trade bread and masks if the trio let us walk with 2 jugs. Hector said the bakery had proper respirators and cloth filters and hot water. Hector did not mention the generator. Hector did not mention the drum. Hector kept it simple. The pistol man looked tempted to escalate. The shotgun man looked tired. The woman looked practical. The woman asked where the bakery was. Hector said the general area without giving a street name. The woman said if the bakery lied, the trio would come find it anyway. The woman said take the 2 jugs and go. The shotgun man nodded once. The pistol man swore under his breath. We took the 2 jugs, capped tight, and backed away slow. We did not turn our backs until we were behind a trailer. Then we moved fast, dragging the cart with the empty drum and the pump gear. I left the drum behind because the trio had claimed it, and I did not want a bullet in the spine over diesel. Diesel matters. Breathing matters more. We walked back toward town with 2 jugs of fuel, a cart full of gear, and adrenaline shaking my hands inside my gloves. Leon kept glancing at me, checking if my breathing was turning into panic. I kept it under control by focusing on steps and distance. Halfway back, the sky darkened enough that it looked near dusk even though it was early afternoon. A new ash pulse rolled in. I do not have a better term. Wind changed direction and the suspended particles thickened fast. Visibility dropped from a block to half a block, then less. My goggles started collecting grit. Mark said we should duck into a building until it passed. Hector shook his head and said being outside during a pulse was bad, but being trapped in a random building was worse. People had been marking buildings for sickness. People had been dying indoors. People had been leaving bodies. I believed Hector. We pushed on. My throat tightened. Even with a respirator, fine particles still irritate. My eyes watered behind goggles. The world turned to gray close distance, nothing beyond. The sound of our cartwheels on ash became the only anchor. A power line somewhere in town made a loud snapping sound, then another, then a harsh buzzing. Leon flinched. Hector said ash plus moisture conducts electricity. Wet ash on insulators causes flashovers. That means sparks and fires. Fires and ash are strange because the air is dirty and oxygen feels thin, but structures still burn when ignition happens. We kept moving. We reached the bakery with lungs burning and shoulders aching. The front door opened only a crack. Earl looked out, saw us, and opened wider. Warmth hit my face. Not cozy warmth. Working building warmth. It felt expensive. I set the jugs down and my hands shook from exertion. Jenna walked over, saw the fuel, and her face shifted for the first time in weeks. Not a smile, something close to relief. We told the group what happened out on the interstate. I did not dramatize it. I said there were armed scavenger groups. I said trading worked better than fighting. I said anyone planning to leave town needed to understand the road was controlled by whoever was willing to stand there with a gun and cough through a mask. I said we got some fuel and we were lucky. That night I poured the diesel through cloth into a clean container, filtering out grit. Cloth does not remove all contamination. It removes the obvious. Diesel with water in it can destroy an injector and stall a generator. I let the fuel sit so any water would settle, then I carefully siphoned from the top. I did the work slow because mistakes mean darkness. The next day the generator coughed again. Not a full failure, a stutter. Lights flickered. The fridge compressor made a sick sound and then resumed. Everyone froze again, then pretended not to. I went outside and opened the generator housing. The air filter was coated. Not just dusty, coated. The intake side looked clogged enough to choke the engine. Ash had built up in every corner. I cleaned it with a brush, then with a damp cloth. Then I shook the filter gently and watched gray powder fall. The filter was not designed for this environment. Nothing was. I checked the oil. The oil looked darker than it should. Ash can get into crankcase systems through the breather if the filter is compromised. If ash gets into oil, it becomes abrasive. Abrasive oil eats bearings. Bearings fail and engines seize. That is a quiet end. I did not have spare oil filters for the generator. I did not have spare anything. I had to improvise. Hector and Mark and I went out again 2 days later, not for fuel, for parts. We found an auto parts store with broken windows already covered in ash drifts. The shelves were stripped in places. Some good items remained because people in panic grab obvious stuff, not boring maintenance items. We found oil filters that match close enough in thread size and gasket diameter to try. We found air filters we could cut and fit into a makeshift intake pre-filter. We found oil, heavy weight, meant for diesel trucks. We loaded it into a cart and hauled it back with lungs tight. We changed the generator oil with everyone watching, because fuel and power had become a shared religion in this building. I drained the old oil into a pan and it came out gritty. Not thick tar, gritty. That made my stomach drop. It meant ash was getting in deeper than I wanted. I installed the closest matching filter, filled new oil, then added a pre-filter layer over the intake using a cut section of air filter material and a clamp. It was crude. It was also better than nothing. For a week it worked. The generator ran smoother. The stutters reduced. People relaxed a little. That lasted until the next catastrophe decided to show up. The roof gave warning signs for days. Creaks, small settling noises, a faint sagging line over the storage area where we stacked flower pallets. We cleared ash off the roof when we could, but the ash was no longer dry powder every time. Snow fell, then melted slightly under weak daylight, then refroze. The mix turned heavy. Heavy weight does not care that a building was built for normal winters. The collapse happened at night, a little after 2 in the morning. I was awake, sitting near the radio table, half listening to static and half watching the generator indicator light. The sound started with a crack, then another, then a long tearing sound that made everyone in the building sit up. A section over the storage room gave way. Not the whole roof, a chunk. It dropped onto shelves and flower pallets with a hard slam. Dust and ash exploded outward through the doorway into the hallway. It hit the air inside the bakery and turned it into a choking cloud. People screamed. Kids cried. Somebody ran for the front door, then stopped because outside meant ash storm. Leon shouted for everyone to cover mouths and get low. I grabbed a respirator and shoved it onto my face. Then I ran toward the storage room. Hector grabbed my sleeve and pulled me back. Hector said, wait for the dust to settle. Wait to see if the rest of the roof was going to follow. Hector was right. I hated Hector for being right. We waited a full minute in the dim emergency lights, holding our breath as much as possible, listening for further collapse. Nothing else fell. The dust cloud thinned. Then I went in with Hector and Mark using headlamps. The storage room looked destroyed. Shelving bent. Bags of flour ripped open. The air was thick with powder and ash. A beam had snapped and dropped at an angle. The hole in the roof showed gray sky and drifting particles falling straight through. Snow mixed with ash drifted in and piled on the wreckage. Earl had been sleeping in the far corner of that room because Earl said the walk in cooler corner was too noisy. Earl was not there now. Earl had moved earlier in the evening without telling anyone because Earl could not sleep. That saved his life. If Earl had been under that section when it fell, Earl would be dead. That realization made Earl sit on the floor later and stare at his hands for a long time. The collapse changed our shelter math fast. We lost a chunk of roof integrity. We lost some flour because water and ash contamination makes it useless. We also gained a major air leak that we could not seal easily because it was above and open. We had to close off that room completely. We taped plastic over the doorway. We shoved damp cloth around the edges. We moved our remaining flour and food supplies into the back office and the lobby storage. We created a smaller living zone inside the bakery, tighter and warmer with fewer drafts. The next day we tried to cover the roof hole from inside with a tarp and boards, pushing it up against the rafters and weighting it down. It helped a bit, but wind still pushed grit in. It also became obvious that the building had a weak point now. Another heavy snowfall could trigger more collapse. People started asking again about leaving. Not in loud speeches, in quiet pairs, whispers and corners. The bakery was still shelter. The bakery was no longer a guarantee. The same day the roof fell, the town's power grid failed in a harsher way. We heard pops and buzzing outside. Then we saw a glow through the ash haze, orange and steady, from a transformer fire 2 blocks away. The fire department did not respond. Maybe nobody could. Maybe nobody tried. Maybe the trucks were dead. Maybe the station was empty. The glow stayed for hours, then faded. Smoke mixed with ash made the air smell bitter. That night, the water pressure dropped to a trickle. Not a warning dip, a near stop. The sinks dribbled. The toilets stopped refilling. The building started smelling wrong within hours because sewer gases creep when traps dry. We poured a little water into drains to keep the traps sealed, but that cost water we could drink. Again, trade-offs. I told everyone to pee in a bucket with a lid and dump it into the toilet only when needed, then flush with minimal water. Nobody liked that. Everybody did it because the alternative was worse. Leon told me something that made my stomach sink. Leon said crowded shelters without running water turn into disease zones fast. Hand-washing stops. Minor cuts get infected. People share cups. Coughs spread. Gastrobugs spread. Pneumonia spreads. Leon said the next wave of deaths would not be from collapsing roofs. The next wave would be from infection and dehydration and cold stress. Leon said we needed cleaner air and better sanitation or we would watch people fade one by one. So I changed the plan. Fuel was still important. The generator was still life. Sanitation became equal priority. I told Hector we needed to secure water in bulk. Not just bottled water, stored water. That meant finding a source that still had pressure or stored tanks. Fire stations, schools, industrial buildings with holding tanks, places with water heaters that could be drained. We sent 2 runners to the nearby fire station during a visibility window. The runners wore respirators and carried a cart. The runners came back with bad news. The fire station doors were locked and ice sealed the edges. The building looked empty. The truck bay had ash piled against the doors. Someone had tried to pry the side door earlier, leaving gouges. A message on the wall said the crew had evacuated weeks earlier. No address, no direction, just a statement. We tried the high school next. The high school sat farther. A long walk for lungs. We waited for a calmer day. Then Hector, Mark, and I went with one extra person, a woman named Tasha, who had worked maintenance at a hotel and knew how to open utility rooms. The high school was half buried in ash drifts at the entrances. The doors were locked. The windows were intact, which meant nobody had stripped it yet, or somebody had and then covered tracks. We found a service entrance with a broken lock. We got inside and the air smelled stale and dusty, but cleaner than outside. We moved through hallways with posters still on walls, sports trophies behind glass. A weird, frozen moment of normal life. We did not linger. We went straight to the mechanical rooms. Tasha found the water heater bank. The tanks were still warm to the touch, which meant some heat remained inside the building structure. That might have been residual. That might have been a backup system. Either way, the water inside those heaters was a resource. We drained it into clean jugs and sealed containers. We also found cases of bottled water in a storage closet near the gym, likely for events. We took what we could carry without turning our group into targets on the street. On the way out, we heard footsteps. Not ours. We froze near a stairwell. A voice called out, asking who was inside. Hector answered in a calm voice and said, "We were just taking water and leaving." The voice answered back, "A man, telling us to stop or he would shoot." Hector told him to keep distance and nobody needed to shoot. We did not see the man's face at first. The man stepped into view near the hallway corner with a rifle held low. The man looked thin. The man's cheeks were hollow. The man's jacket was too big. The man had the tense posture of somebody who had been alone a long time and hated it. The man asked how many people were with us and where we were from. Hector said we were from the bakery and we were keeping a small shelter running. The man's eyes shifted at the word bakery. The man asked about food. Hector said we had bread. The man asked about fuel. Hector said limited. The man asked if there was heat. Hector said yes, some. The man lowered his rifle a little and made a choice that surprised me. The man said he had been living in the school for 2 weeks with one other person, his sister, and his sister was sick. The man asked if we had medical supplies. The man asked if we had a cleaner space. The man's voice cracked on the last part. Leon was not with us on that run. I felt that gap hard. I told the man we had limited supplies, but we had warm space and water and some masks. I told the man bringing sickness inside could endanger everyone. I said it straight. The man nodded, like he already knew. The man said his sister was coughing blood the previous night. That hit me hard. Coughing blood in this environment could be lung damage from ash, severe pneumonia, or worse. I made another ugly decision. I told the man we could not bring his sister into the main room. I told the man we could set up a quarantine corner in the back office with plastic sheeting and one caregiver. I told the man we could help with warm fluids and whatever medicine we had. I also told the man I could not promise survival. I told the man the hospital was overwhelmed and the trip would be brutal. The man swallowed hard and said he would bring her. The man asked for one thing. The man asked that nobody point a weapon at her when she came in. I promised. I also told him we would keep our doors locked and he would need to knock and identify himself. The man said his name was Sean. I told him mine. Then we left with our water before more people showed up. We hauled the water back to the bakery and stored it in clean bins. For the first time in days, people washed hands with more than a wet wipe. That lifted the mood more than bread did. It also reminded everyone what we had lost. Normal water pressure was one of those invisible luxuries. When it goes away, everything gets harder fast. Sean arrived the next afternoon with his sister Mia in a wagon made from a school cart. Mia looked exhausted and gray. Mia's breathing was shallow. Mia's lips looked dry. Sean kept adjusting Mia's blanket. Sean's eyes were wild with worry. We brought Mia into the back office quarantine corner we built using plastic and tape. Leon checked Mia and said Mia's lungs sounded bad. Leon said Mia needed antibiotics and oxygen and rest. We had no oxygen. We had a few leftover antibiotics from somebody's home stash, not a full course. And Leon said partial courses can breed resistance and still fail. Leon still gave Mia what he could because doing nothing felt worse. Leon also warned Sean that Mia might not make it. Sean nodded and sat by her side anyway, holding her hand through the gloves. The bakery started feeling tighter with every new person. The roof damage had reduced our usable space. The water we brought back helped, but it also made us a target if anyone learned we had it. People in town were already shifting from scavenging to taking. I saw it in the way footsteps approached the building now, not hesitant, more deliberate. One evening, near dusk, someone knocked hard and kept knocking. The voice outside demanded we open. The voice did not ask. The voice said the person outside had kids and needed food. I spoke through the window and told the person to step back and show hands. The person refused. The person said if we did not open, the person would break the glass. Earl moved behind me with his old hunting rifle. Earl kept it low, pointed down but visible. Earl did not speak. That rifle was not for show. Earl was not a tough guy, but Earl had hit the point where fear turned into blunt protection. I hated that too. I told the person outside we would slide bread out through a gap if the person stepped back. I told the person we would not open fully. The person outside cursed and kicked the door. The glass rattled. Then a second voice joined in. Lower, telling the first to back off. I heard footsteps scrape an ash, then the knocking stopped. 10 minutes later, a brick hit the front window. It did not break the glass fully, but it cracked and spidered. People screamed. Kids started crying. The sound punched the room. I grabbed duct tape and started sealing the cracked area immediately. Cracked glass becomes an air leak. Air leaks bring ash. Ash kills slowly. That night I told everyone we had crossed into a new phase. I said there would be more attempts. I said we needed a stronger door plan. We moved heavy tables and flour bins against the front door from the inside, leaving just enough space to open a small gap for controlled exchanges. We also started using a side exit only for trusted runners, always in pairs. Hector suggested we reach out to the tire shop group and form a block defense. A shared watch schedule, shared signals. If one shelter got hit, the other could respond. I liked the idea. I also knew responding meant going outside into ash and potential gunfire. Still, isolation makes people vulnerable. We needed allies. We sent a runner with a written note because shouting on the street draws attention. The note proposed a simple plan. Lights in the window at specific times to show status. 3 knocks pattern on a back door for trusted people. A whistle signal if someone was being attacked. No fancy stuff. Simple, the tire shop group agreed. 2 days later, we heard the whistle. It came faint through walls, but real. Hector moved fast, grabbed his respirator, grabbed a flashlight, and told me to choose. Stay or come. I chose to come because if the tire shop fell, we would be next. Earl and Mark came too. Leon stayed with Mia in the sick corner. Jenna stayed with the kids. Outside, the air felt harsher than the previous day. Cold had deepened. The ash underfoot crunched with ice in it. We moved along building edges, keeping to shadows even though it was daytime. We saw the tire shop front door area and 2 people were trying to pry it. One person had a crowbar, the other had a hammer. A third person stood back watching the street. Hector shouted once, loud, telling them to stop and leave. The prying people turned. The lookout raised a pistol. Earl raised his rifle, still low, then brought it up enough to be clear. Nobody fired. The standoff lasted a few seconds that felt long. The pistol person looked at Earl's rifle and made a choice. The pistol person did not want to trade shots in ash. The prying people backed away, then ran down the street, dragging feet through the drifts. The pistol person followed, glancing back once. The tire shop door stayed closed. Someone inside shouted thanks through a gap. Hector told the tire shop guy to reinforce the door. Hector told the tire shop guy to stop waiting until an attack to respond. The tire shop guy sounded scared and embarrassed. That was fair. Everybody was learning in real time. On the walk back, Mark stumbled. Not a fall, a stagger. Mark bent forward and started coughing hard, one long coughing spell that did not stop. Leon was not with us. I grabbed Mark's shoulder and told him to breathe slow through the mask. Mark shook his head and kept coughing. Mark's eyes watered and he gagged once. Mark said his chest hurt. We got Mark back inside and Leon checked him. Leon said Mark had been pushing too hard for too many days. Leon said the masks help, but exertion still irritates lungs. Leon said cold, dry air plus ash, exposure plus stress, can trigger inflammation that turns into pneumonia. Leon listened to Mark's lungs and frowned. Leon gave Mark warm water and told Mark to rest. Rest is hard in a room full of noise and fear. Mark tried anyway. That night, Mark's fever started. Mark shivered under blankets and still felt cold. Mark's breathing sped up. Leon said Mark might need antibiotics. Then Leon looked at our small stash and did not say the next part out loud. If we used antibiotics on Mark, we might run out before the next person. If we did not use antibiotics, Mark might die. That is the kind of decision that rots your brain. I told Leon to treat Mark. I said Mark had been part of keeping this place alive. I said Mark deserved the same effort we gave everyone. Leon nodded and gave Mark a proper course with what we had left, splitting doses carefully and tracking it in Lila's notebook. Mia died 2 days later. It happened quiet. Sean fell asleep sitting upright, then woke up and realized her breathing had stopped. Sean made a sound that was not a scream, more a broken exhale. Jenna took the kids out of the main room so they would not watch. Leon checked Mia and confirmed. Then we did the same grim procedure again, wrapping and moving, trying to keep the building sanitary and the air clean. Sean sat near the back wall and stared at the floor. Sean did not blame us out loud. Sean also did not forgive the world. I saw it in his posture. Sean stayed anyway. That surprised me. Sean could have left and gone feral. Sean could have tried to take control. Sean did neither. Sean started helping with night watch and hauling water. Sean said he had nothing else now, and the idea of being alone in that school again made him feel sick. I understood. Then the gas shut off, not gradually, not a warning dip. It stopped mid-bake. I had dough in the ovens. The flame died. The temperature dropped. The ovens became cold metal boxes. I turned knobs, checked pilot, checked valves. Nothing. I tried again an hour later. Still nothing. I checked other gas appliances. Dead. The room reaction was immediate. Not panic screaming, more a heavy shift. People looked at the ovens the way people look at a dead friend. The ovens had been our heat anchor and our food processing machine. Without gas, baking became impossible unless we used electric elements, which we did not have, or unless we built a wood fire system, which was not realistic in a commercial oven. I told everyone we were switching to no-bake rations. Flatbread on a griddle might still work if the griddle ran on electricity and the generator could handle it. The generator could not handle sustained high draw. The generator was sized for lights and refrigeration, not for acting as a replacement utility grid. We could still warm water in pots using a small propane camp stove we had, but propane was limited. Heat became the main problem overnight. We moved sleeping areas tighter. Bodies near bodies, blankets layered. We sealed more of the building, reducing the living zone to keep it warmer. That also meant less space, more breath, more risk of disease spread. Trade-offs again. I made a fuel decision that felt wrong, but necessary. I reduced generator runtime to 2 short blocks per day. 1 in the morning for refrigeration check, water heating, and radio listening. 1 in the evening for the same. The rest of the time, we lived with dim battery lights and cold. That decision made people angry. Nobody yelled. The anger showed in tight faces and short replies. I accepted it because the alternative was burning fuel fast and dying sooner. When the generator ran less, radio contact got weaker. I still listened during our windows. I still did my short update. Fewer voices answered. More silence. The few voices that did answer sounded worse, colder, more desperate. One night I heard a voice claiming there was a heated shelter operating out of an industrial facility near Twin Falls, powered by a big diesel generator bank with proper filtration pulled from agricultural warehouses. The voice said the shelter had rules, and armed security, and a doctor. The voice said the shelter was accepting families and trades. The voice said the shelter had food stores and warm sleeping areas. The voice also said the shelter was turning away anyone who showed signs of respiratory disease. That last part sounded real. That last part also sounded brutal. Hector listened with me and did not react. After the voice faded, Hector said the story had details. Not just a fantasy. Hector said the claim about agricultural filtration was plausible because certain facilities use heavy-duty filters for dust control. Hector said the distance to Twin Falls was too far on foot for most people here. Hector said reaching it would require a functioning vehicle, multiple filter changes, and a clear route. None of that existed. Mark was still sick, but improving slowly. Mark listened too and said, if there was any chance, we should try. Jenna looked up from her corner and asked who would carry kids that far. Jenna asked who would carry water. Jenna asked who would fight off the road groups. Jenna asked who would keep Mark breathing. Nobody answered because the answers were ugly. I did not dismiss the shelter rumor. I also refused to let it become a fantasy that got people killed. I said if we moved anywhere, we needed something closer, something reachable in stages, something we could verify. That is when Lila brought up a place I had forgotten. Lila said her uncle used to store potatoes in an underground cellar on the edge of town, near the river plain. Lila said the cellar was built into the slope with a thick door and vents that could be filtered. Lila said the cellar stayed cool in summer and stable in winter. Lila said the cellar had a hand pump well nearby. Lila was not sure if the well was working. Lila said the cellar might be a better long-term base than a damaged bakery with a cracked window and a roof hole. That idea hit hard because it was local and physical. Not a rumor about a faraway safe zone, a real place somebody had seen. Underground spaces have advantages: temperature stability, protection from wind, reduced ash infiltration if vents are controlled. The downside is ventilation. Poor ventilation kills people fast if the vents clog or someone burns fuel indoors. We would need a real plan for air. Hector asked Lila for details: direction, distance, landmarks. Lila described it in terms of roads and fences and a big rusted irrigation pipe. Lila said it was around 5 miles from the bakery, maybe less. 5 miles on a good day is a casual walk. 5 miles in ash and cold with supplies is a serious event. 5 miles with kids and sick people is dangerous. Still, it was not 40 miles. It was possible. We chose to scout it first. A small team again. Me, Hector, Mark, if Mark could handle it, and Sean, because Sean had become steady, and because Sean knew how to move quietly. Leon insisted on coming for medical. I told Leon no because we needed Leon here with the sick and the fragile. Leon argued. Leon said splitting medical support was risky. I said taking Leon outside risked losing Leon entirely. Leon hated it, but stayed. The scout run happened on one of the coldest mornings yet, with the air still and visibility better. The ground was crusted with ash and ice. We wore layers and moved slow. We carried a small cart with water, respirators, a few food bars, a flashlight, extra batteries, and basic tools. No big load. Just enough to check and return. The edge of town felt more empty than the center. Houses sat with curtains drawn. Some had doors open, drifting. Some had messages scrawled on cardboard taped to windows. One said, "Gone south." Another said, "Sick inside." Another had no message and a broken window that told its own story. We passed a small creek and saw the water surface covered in a gray skin near the banks. Ash had settled into a layer. Flow under it continued, but the surface looked wrong. I did not drink from it. I did not even want to touch it. Ash can carry metals and irritants. Boiling kills microbes, not particles. You need filtration and settling and sometimes chemical treatment. We did not have enough gear for that in the field. We reached the slope Lila described and found the cellar door half buried. Not snow. Ash drifted against it. The door was thick wood, reinforced with metal bands. The lock looked intact. No pry marks. That was good. That also meant the door might be stuck. Hector and Sean dug around the frame with a shovel and a pry bar. The ash came away in heavy clumps. My shoulders burned from the cold and work. Mark coughed a few times but stayed steady. When the pry bar finally shifted the door, the hinge squealed and a puff of stale cold air came out. The air smelled earthy, not rotten. That smell made my chest loosen. Earth smell means the place had not become a sealed death box with mold bloom and dead animals. We opened the door enough to slip inside. The interior was dim. We used flashlights. The cellar was a long, narrow space with stacked wooden bins and shelving. It was mostly empty now. A few sacks of old potatoes remained in one corner, shriveled and unusable. The space was dry. The ceiling was low. The walls were packed earth reinforced with wood framing. The temperature felt stable, not warm, but not biting cold. That stability is gold in a world where heat is scarce. We found the vent pipes. 2 of them. Metal pipes running up toward the surface, 1 intake, 1 exhaust. Each had a basic screen cap. The screens were clogged with ash. That worried me. If ash clogged the vents completely, the cellar would have stale air and dangerous carbon dioxide buildup with a group living inside. We cleaned the screens carefully, then looked inside the pipe. Ash had drifted down a bit, but not fully blocked. Hector said we could build a filter box on the intake vent using layered cloth and filter material from the auto parts run. Hector said we could also rig a small low-power fan during generator windows to push air through, then shut it off and rely on passive exchange the rest of the time. Passive exchange works if the vents stay open in wind shifts. Passive exchange fails when vents clog or when a group is too big. We would need to cap group size or increase ventilation capacity. We looked for the well Lila mentioned. Outside, near a stand of dead weeds and a fence line, we found a hand pump. The pump handle was stiff. Sean worked it slowly. The first strokes produced nothing. Then a wet sucking sound. Then a trickle. Then water. Real water. Cold and clear, at least visually. I felt my throat tighten with relief. We did not drink it raw. We filled a bottle to test back at the bakery with settling and boiling. Still, water from a well is a different level of survival. It means independence from city pressure. It means you can flush occasionally. It means you can wash hands. It means you can keep people alive longer. We went back to the bakery with that news. People reacted in mixed ways. Relief, fear, exhaustion. Moving meant risk. Staying meant slow decline. The cellar presented a new option that was not fantasy. It was also not easy. I called the group together again. I said the cellar existed. I said it had stable temperature and a working well. I said it needed ventilation work and strict rules. I said moving everyone at once could kill someone on the road. I suggested a phased move. First move supplies and set up the cellar for occupancy. Then move the most vulnerable, kids and sick, during the clearest day we could find. Then move the rest. I also said anyone who wanted to stay in town could coordinate with the tire shop group. Splitting was risky, but forcing everyone into one plan was also risky. Arguments started. Quiet at first, then louder. Sean did not want to move. Sean said Mia died and the idea of leaving town felt pointless. Sean said underground spaces make him feel trapped. Jenna wanted to move because Jenna could not sleep under a damaged roof anymore. Earl wanted to move because Earl trusted dirt and wood more than glass storefronts. Mark wanted to move because Mark said the air in town felt worse, and every day inside the bakery tasted dusty. Leon wanted to stay because Leon worried about managing sickness on the road, and because Leon said the cellar could become a suffocation pit if vents clogged. Leon was not wrong. I listened until the noise started looping. Then I stopped it. I said we were not voting on feelings. We were deciding on logistics. I said we would do a test move with supplies first. No kids, no sick. Just a small team carrying food, water, blankets, filters, and basic tools to set up the cellar. If the move went wrong, the bakery still existed. If the cellar proved workable, we would decide the next phase. That plan got acceptance because it did not force immediate risk on everyone. People need a step they can picture. We waited 2 days for a decent window. During those 2 days, ashfall eased slightly and then surged again, reminding us nobody controlled this. The cold deepened. The inside of the bakery dropped to near 40 degrees Fahrenheit during nights without gas heat. People slept wrapped tight. Breath showed faint in the air. Kids coughed. The urgency increased without anyone saying it. The supply move team went out at mid-morning on the third day. Me, Hector, Earl, Mark, and Tasha. Mark insisted even though Mark still had a cough. Mark said the move mattered, and he wanted to carry his own weight. I accepted, because Mark had been slipping into a dark mood. Giving Mark a job might save Mark's head, even if it stressed Mark's lungs. We loaded carts with sealed food, flour in plastic bins, bottled water, blankets, the best filters, duct tape, basic medical supplies, and tools. We also carried a small battery lantern and a carbon monoxide detector from the hardware store, one of the few we found during scavenging. The detector was not perfect, but it could warn us if we made a ventilation mistake. We moved along the same route to the cellar, faster this time because we knew it. Halfway there, we saw people on the road, 5 of them, pulling a sled made from a door. The group looked tired and hungry. One man waved and shouted through cloth, asking if we had food. Hector kept moving and told them we were just passing, no space. The man started following. The man's pace increased. That was the moment the calm plan threatened to become chaos. If those 5 people decided to follow us to the cellar would become overcrowded before we even prepared it. Overcrowding underground kills. Overcrowding also attracts more groups. A rumor spreads and suddenly you have 30 people at a door. I stopped and turned, keeping distance. I told the man to stop following. I told the man we could spare 1 loaf and some water, then the group needed to turn back. The man argued. The man said the group had kids and somebody was sick. The man said every building in town was closed. The man said he could not go back. Earl stepped forward with his rifle visible, pointed down. Earl said no. Earl said if the group followed, Earl would treat it as a threat. Earl did not shout. Earl sounded cold and certain. The group stopped. The man stared at Earl, then at the carts, then at me. I hated what came next, but I did it anyway. I handed the man 1 loaf wrapped tight and 2 sealed water bottles. I told the man to take the supplies and go. I told the man to find the school, the tire shop, or the church basement. I did not mention the cellar. The man's eyes narrowed. The man knew I was holding something back. The man also took the supplies because hunger beats pride. The group turned away slowly, still watching. We resumed the move, tension sitting in our shoulders. Hector said that was the first test. Not ash, not cold, people. Hector said more tests were coming. We reached the cellar and started setup. First job was ventilation. We built a filter box around the intake vent pipe using a plastic storage bin with a cutout. We layered filter material inside, then cloth, then another filter layer. We sealed edges with duct tape and used a clamp to hold the box tight. The goal was simple. Incoming air passes through layers and drops a lot of ash. It would not be perfect. It would reduce exposure. We also cleared the exhaust vent and built a simple hood on it to keep drifting ash from falling straight down. We used a cut piece of metal flashing and wired it into a cap shape. Earl said it looked crude. Earl was right. Crude is fine if it works. We moved blankets and sleeping pads into the cellar and created zones. A main sleeping row along one wall, a separate corner for anyone sick, with plastic sheeting to reduce airflow mixing. A small cooking corner near the door, not deep inside, so any stove use could vent easier. We marked a rule in the notebook. No open flame inside unless the vent path was clear and the carbon monoxide detector stayed active. We tested the well water back at the cellar with a simple settle test. It looked clear in a jar after an hour. That did not mean it was safe. We planned to boil and treat with chlorine when possible. Still, the fact water existed here changed everything. Then we heard a vehicle, not close, but real. An engine sound, weak, struggling, then a stall. We froze. Vehicles had become rare. A running engine meant somebody had kept filters and fuel. A running engine meant somebody had power. It also meant somebody might have a weapon and the confidence to use it. Hector climbed the slope edge and looked toward the road. Hector came back down fast and said a pickup had limped in, then died. 2 people got out and started walking this direction, pulling a cart. Hector said the people looked purposeful. Hector also said 1 man carried a rifle. We had a choice: hide and hope the people passed, or confront early, keep the cellar secret. I chose confront. I told everyone to stay inside except Hector and Earl and me. I told Mark and Tasha to keep working and stay quiet. We walked to meet the approaching pair before the pair reached the cellar door. The pair saw us and stopped. The man with the rifle held it low. The woman beside him carried a backpack and a small child's blanket tied to the cart. The woman looked exhausted. The man looked alert. The man asked if we had seen a working shelter. The man said his kid was coughing and the kid needed warm air. The man's eyes flicked to the slope and the vent pipes. The man was not dumb. The man saw something here. I told the man this was private property and not a public shelter. I told the man we could spare a small amount of water and food and send the pair toward the high school where some people had been sheltering. I kept my voice steady. I did not over-explain. Over-explaining gives away fear, and fear invites pressure. The woman started crying quietly. The woman said the high school was locked, and someone with a rifle had chased them away earlier. That might have been Sean. That might have been someone else. The woman said the hospital had turned them away because the kid had a cough. The woman said the kid's father had tried to keep the pickup running, but filters were gone. Earl shifted his stance. Earl's rifle stayed down. Earl's posture said no. Hector looked at me and waited. This was my call. I asked one question. I asked if the kid was with them right now. The woman pointed to the cart. A small shape under blankets moved slightly. A weak cough came from under the fabric. My chest tightened. I thought about Eli. I thought about Jenna. I thought about Sean losing Mia. I thought about the cellar ventilation math. One more sick kid inside could push our air quality down and spread disease. Turning them away could mean the kid dies outdoors. I made the most realistic decision I could live with. I said the kid could rest near the door area for 1 hour while we gave warm water and assessed. I said no entry deeper into the cellar. I said the man must leave the rifle outside. I said if the man refused, the deal was off. The man hesitated. Hector did not blink. Earl did not blink. The woman stared at the kid, then at the man. The man slowly set the rifle on the ground and stepped back. The woman exhaled and nodded. We brought the cart to the cellar door and kept it near the entrance. Tasha brought warm water in a sealed bottle and a cloth. Mark looked at the kid's face and said the kid's lips were cracked and the kid's breathing sounded raspy. The kid's eyes stayed half closed. Leon was not here. We had limited ability to treat. We gave small sips of water. We kept the kid covered. We kept the carbon monoxide detector on and did not light any stove because we did not need extra fumes. The woman told us the kid's name was Wyatt. The woman said the family had been sheltering in a garage until the roof partially collapsed. The woman said the kid's cough started weeks ago and kept worsening. The man said nothing, just watched everyone's hands and kept his own close. After an hour, the kid looked slightly more awake. The kid still coughed. The kid was still sick. The woman begged again, asking to stay. I said no. I said the cellar had limited air and limited space. I said we would give supplies, then the family needed to move. I offered a direction toward a farmhouse cluster where I had heard one group had set up a small shelter in a machine shed. I did not give the exact location of our bakery. I did not mention our group count. I gave just enough to give a chance. The man picked up his rifle without pointing it. The woman looked like she wanted to argue, then she saw Earl's face and stopped. The family took 2 loaves and 4 water bottles and left, pulling the cart slow. The kid coughed again. The sound followed me even after the pair vanished into the gray. That was the moment I realized the cellar would not stay secret for long. People were moving more now, searching. Any visible vent pipe, any sign of human maintenance attracts attention. We needed to decide fast, either occupy and defend and build rules, or abandon and keep moving. We returned to the bakery that evening with the setup done and the fear heavier. I told the group what happened with the family. The room went quiet. Jenna stared at the floor. Sean stared at the wall. Leon rubbed his forehead. Lila wrote it down without looking up. I said we had a limited window before more people discovered the cellar. I said if we chose to move, we needed to move the vulnerable first, because moving later would mean moving under pressure, maybe under threat. Pressure makes mistakes. Mistakes kill. We decided on the phased move. Not everyone agreed, but most accepted. The bakery would become a staging point for 1 more week. During that week, we would move supplies quietly in small trips. We would limit broadcasts even more so we did not draw attention. We would also coordinate with the tire shop group, offering the tire shop the bakery space if we left, which might keep another shelter alive in town. The next days were exhausting. Every trip outside felt harder because cold kept deepening and ash pulses kept returning. Mark improved but stayed fragile. Jenna helped pack. Sean became more tense, watching the door constantly. Earl took door watch, shifts without complaint. Hector acted calm, but I could see Hector's jaw tight when the generator stuttered. On the 5th day, the generator failed for real. It started, ran rough, then a loud clank hit from inside the housing and the engine stalled. I tried again. It cranked but did not catch. I opened the housing and smelled burnt oil and diesel. I checked the oil level. Low. I checked for leaks. I found a drip line that had cracked, probably from cold and vibration. Oil had bled out slowly, then the engine ran under-lubricated, then damage happened. That is how machines die in disasters. Not dramatic, slow wear, then sudden end. We tried patching the line, we tried refilling oil, we tried cranking again. The engine made a grinding sound and refused. I stopped. Forcing it could cause a fire or complete seizure. The generator was done. The building went quiet in the wrong way. People looked at the lights, then at the radio, then at me. Without the generator, the bakery lost its main edge. Refrigeration would fail. Battery lights would drain. The radio would go silent. I took the battery radio and turned it on. Static. A faint, distant voice. Then nothing. Either the stations were down or the signal was buried under interference. I turned the dial anyway. Slow, searching. I found one weak voice talking from somewhere far, maybe south, giving generic bulletins about conserving heat. The voice cut out every few words. That was not useful. That was a reminder that the information stream was dying. That night, I made the final call. We moved to the cellar at first light. Vulnerable first, fast and quiet. We leave a note for the tire shop group about the generator failure and the bakery's condition. We take the carbon monoxide detector, the remaining respirators, the clean water, and the medical supplies. We abandon the ovens and the storefront and the idea that this building would save us for months. Some people did not come. 2 adults decided to stay in town, hoping to find family or join another group. I did not stop them. Forcing people creates resentment, and resentment ruins groups. I gave those adults food and water and a direction toward the tire shop. I told those adults to avoid the highway. I told those adults to stay indoors during ash pulses. The adults nodded and left. I watched them go, and I did not know if I would see them again. We left before full daylight, moving in 2 waves. The first wave carried kids, sick, and the most essential gear. The second wave carried heavier supplies and tools. We used carts and sleds. We wore respirators and goggles. We moved with discipline because panic would scatter us. The road to the cellar felt longer with the vulnerable. Jenna carried a child for a stretch until her arms shook, then Earl took over. Leon monitored Mark and another older woman with chronic bronchitis, keeping them moving slow, and stopping before breathing became frantic. Sean walked near the rear, rifle slung, scanning behind. Hector walked near the front, scanning ahead. I stayed near the middle, trying to see everything and failing because the world was still gray and my goggles fogged at the edges from breath. We encountered the 5-person group from earlier again, the same man with the sled. This time the group blocked the road farther ahead, standing in a line, using the sled and a broken fence section as a barrier. The man raised his voice and demanded we share our supplies. The man said we had more than we needed. The man said it was unfair. I did not negotiate long. Negotiation with a desperate group on an open road puts everyone at risk. I told the man we would give 1 loaf and 1 bottle per person, then we would pass. The man said no. He wanted more. The man stepped forward. Earl raised his rifle, still pointed down at first, then lifted enough that it was clearly aimed at the ground in front of the man. Hector shouted once, telling the man to stop. The man hesitated. The man's friend, a woman, pulled the man back by his sleeve. The woman said the man would get everyone killed. The woman looked at our kids and at Leon's medical bag and made a practical decision. The woman said, "Take the deal." The man cursed and spit into ash. We slid bread and water forward and moved around the barrier without turning our backs until we had distance. Nobody fired. Nobody wanted to. The point was clear. The road was not safe. The road was controlled by whoever was willing to push hardest. Our group survived that encounter because we moved as a unit, showed readiness, and offered enough to avoid escalation. That will not work every time. I am not selling it as a trick. It was one moment that did not turn lethal. We reached the cellar by early afternoon. The door opened and the air inside felt stable, calmer, quieter. People filed in and sat down without being told, exhausted. Kids drank water. Leon checked the sick corner setup and adjusted plastic sheeting to keep airflow separate. Hector checked the vent filters and cleaned the exterior screens again. Earl took a position near the door and watched. Sean paced, then forced himself to sit. Jenna leaned against the wall and closed her eyes for a long time. The first night underground felt both safer and worse. Safer because wind and ash could not reach us directly. Worse because the space felt tight and every cough sounded louder. The carbon monoxide detector sat near the door on a crate, silent. We did not use flame. We did not cook. We ate cold bread and canned food and drank water and tried to sleep. I lay there listening to the vent, listening to the faint movement of air. It was not a strong airflow. It was enough to feel a slight cool drift near the intake. I counted breaths in my head and tried not to panic about stale air. Panic makes breathing faster, which makes stale air worse. I forced myself calm by doing math. Group count, oxygen need, vent capacity. The math was rough because I did not have instruments. Still, the presence of 2 vents and a filtered intake gave me some confidence. In the morning, we tested the air by doing simple checks. Headache reports, dizziness reports, nausea reports. Nobody had those symptoms beyond normal stress. That suggested ventilation was adequate for now. We still kept rules. No running, no exertion indoors. No open flame unless necessary. Door stays closed except for controlled exits. We sent a small team back toward town that day to collect the last supplies from the bakery and deliver the note to the tire shop group. Hector went. Mark stayed because Mark's lungs were still fragile. Sean wanted to go, but I told Sean to rest. Earl went with Hector. Tasha went too because Tasha could carry and move fast. I stayed because somebody needed to maintain the cellar setup and keep order with the vulnerable. That felt strange. 2 months earlier, I would have insisted on going with Hector. Now I understood that my role had shifted. While the team was gone, a new problem hit. The vent intake filter box started clogging faster than expected. The ash outside had shifted into finer particle dominance, and the filter layers caught more. Airflow slowed. I noticed because the slight drift near the intake weakened. I checked the external screen through the door crack and saw it coated again. Clearing it meant going outside, even briefly. I chose to do it immediately rather than wait. Waiting would let airflow degrade until people got headaches and panic set in. I put on my respirator and goggles, opened the door just enough to step out, cleaned the screen with a brush, and shook the filter box gently. The ash fell in a soft pile. The wind picked up and threw grit at my face shield. I stepped back inside and sealed the door fast. Airflow improved slightly. That told me the truth. Vent maintenance would be constant. Constant maintenance means constant risk. Still, it was manageable if done smart and short. Hector's team returned after dark. Hector brought a few remaining supply bins plus news that turned my stomach. The tire shop group had been attacked again, worse this time. 2 armed people tried to break in. The tire shop guys fought them off without shots, using a metal bar and intimidation. One tire shop guy took a head injury and was bleeding. The tire shop guys were thinking about leaving town too. Hector gave them our cellar direction in partial detail, then told them to decide fast. That meant the cellar would not stay private much longer. The alternative was leaving neighbors to die. Hector made a human decision. That comes with cost. Hector also said the bakery had been hit. Not a full break-in, but the front window crack had been widened, and someone had reached inside to try to unlock the door. The barricade held. The building had been looted elsewhere, with the back storage room roof hole letting ash pour in. Hector said staying there another week would have been a mistake. Hearing that made me feel relief, mixed with grief. I had loved that place in a working way. It was gone now. The next day's underground became a grind of controlled routines. Water from the well got boiled and treated. We used a small amount of household bleach from our scavenged supplies, measuring drops carefully, then waiting, then airing the water to reduce taste. Leon supervised because dosing mistakes can make people sick. We kept a strict latrine plan using a lidded bucket and lime powder we scavenged from a garden store, adding a layer after use to reduce smell and flies. Flies still appeared eventually, even in cold, because life finds cracks. We trapped them with sticky strips. Food shifted to ration bars, canned goods, and bread baked earlier. Without ovens, bread would eventually run out. Flour remained, but turning flour into food without baking is hard. We made simple cold dough dumplings that could be cooked in boiled water when propane allowed, which was rare. We conserved propane for medical water heating and emergency warmth during extreme cold nights. The cold outside dropped again. I learned that by opening the door for vent maintenance and feeling the air hit. It felt below 0 Fahrenheit one morning. My eyelashes stiffened with frost inside the goggles. I was outside less than a minute and my fingers still hurt through the gloves. That level of cold plus ash exposure can kill a person who gets lost. It also makes travel nearly impossible for kids and sick. That meant the cellar was no longer just an option. The cellar was a commitment. One night we heard knocking on the cellar door. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks. The pattern Hector and the tire shop agreed on. Earl lifted his rifle, stayed silent. I moved close and asked for identification through the door. A voice answered, the tire shop group leader. His name was Devin. Devin said he had 3 people and 1 injured. Devin said the tire shop was no longer safe. Devin said he had followed the directions and found the vent pipes. Devin asked to enter. This was the moment I had feared. Accepting more people increases food consumption and increases ventilation needs. Refusing could mean Devin and his people die outside in below 0 temperatures. I asked Leon for his read. Leon said adding 4 adults might be manageable if we increased vent maintenance and kept exertion low. Leon also warned that the injured person could bring infection risk. Leon said we could quarantine again near the door. I opened the door and let Devin's group in. The injured person had a bandaged head and looked shaky. Devin's people looked exhausted and scared. Devin kept his hands visible and thanked us twice without being dramatic. I told Devin the rules immediately. Quarantine corner near the door. No weapons inside in hand. Rifles stay slung. No shouting. No power games. Devin nodded and said he wanted sleep and water. Not a kingdom. That was good enough. Devin's arrival also meant the cellar was now a known shelter. More people would follow. Devin said he had seen other groups moving in the general direction, watching him. Devin said he had taken a long route to avoid being tailed. Devin still believed somebody saw him disappear near the slope. That meant we needed a defense plan. Not a fantasy plan, a realistic one. Hector and Devin and Earl and I talked near the door in low voices. We agreed on a controlled entry policy. Anyone approaching must stop at a distance and speak. Anyone with weapons must show safe posture. Anyone sick must be disclosed before entry. Anyone refusing rules would be turned away. Devin said turning people away would trigger attacks. Devin said we needed a visible deterrent of no without firing shots. Earl suggested building an outer barrier at the door approach, something that forces any approaching group to slow and funnel. We did not have lumber, but we had salvage. Hector said we could drag metal panels and old fence sections and create a narrow walkway to the door, with noise traps on either side, cans filled with ash that rattle when kicked. That would give early warning and buy time. We agreed. We also agreed the radio roll was essentially dead now. Without generator power, I could not broadcast reliably. I had a handheld unit with a battery pack, but battery life was limited and charging options were minimal. We had a small solar panel scavenged from a yard light, not enough to run a radio system. The information node phase was ending. Survival phase had taken over. That hurt in a quiet way. The voice I had been, the person talking to strangers out there, was shrinking back into the dirt. Days later, another catastrophe hit. This time outside our control and inside our shelter. A respiratory sickness spread through the group. It started with 1 person coughing more, then 2, then fever. Leon suspected a mix of ash, irritation and infection, possibly bacterial, possibly viral. Crowded indoor spaces make spread easy. Even with quarantine corners, shared air and shared surfaces still spread disease. Leon told everyone to wear masks indoors when close to others. People hated that. People did it because fear is a good motivator. Mark relapsed. Mark's cough deepened. Mark's fever returned. Leon used the last of our antibiotics on Mark because Mark had responded the first time and because Mark was young enough to survive if we gave him a chance. That left nothing for the next person. Leon told me that we were now in a phase where small infections could turn fatal. Leon said hand washing and ventilation and rest were the only defenses we had. One morning, Devin's injured guy, his name was Pete, got dizzy and vomited. Pete's skin looked pale. Pete's lips looked blue at the edges. Leon checked and said Pete might have carbon dioxide buildup symptoms or early pneumonia. Leon moved Pete closer to the intake vent zone where air was freshest. Leon also ordered everyone to minimize movement and keep the vents clear. I could feel panic rising in the room because underground spaces trigger that reaction. Panic makes people breathe faster. Faster breathing increases carbon dioxide output. That can spiral. I did the only thing that works sometimes. I gave people tasks. I told Tasha to check the vent screens. I told Hector to adjust the filter layers. I told Earl to keep the door closed and quiet. I told Jenna to keep kids calm with simple routines. I told Devin to inventory water and confirm we had enough for the day. People moved. Movement toward purpose reduces panic. Vent maintenance fixed the immediate issue. The intake screen had clogged again. Clearing it increased airflow. Pete's breathing improved over the next hour. The crisis eased. Nobody celebrated. Everyone just got quieter. It showed us how fragile this shelter really was. One clogged vent could kill us. That night, I sat near the door with the handheld radio and tried again to listen. I caught a faint transmission, broken by static, from someone describing conditions in Boise. The person said the city had rolling blackouts, then full outages. The person said the shelters were overcrowded and sanitation was failing. The person said a fuel depot fire had destroyed a major supply. The person said the temperature had dropped far below normal and people were freezing in apartments. The person said government voices had vanished. The person said local groups were running checkpoints on some roads. Then the signal died. Hector listened too and said the message confirmed what we already suspected. Cities were not safe. Crowds were not safe. Fuel distribution was not coming back soon. The supervolcano winter was turning into a long survival situation with no rescue arc. I did not say that out loud to the group. The group already felt it. A week later, we heard footsteps outside near the slope. Multiple sets. Not just one family. The noise traps we built outside rattled faint through dirt. Earl raised his rifle. Devin moved to the door. Hector looked at me. This was the next test. A voice called out from outside. A man. The man said he knew there was a shelter here. The man said he had seen people come and go. The man said he had 10 people and he was taking the shelter by force if necessary. The man said he would break the vent pipes if we refused. That threat hit hard because the man had figured out our weakness. I answered through the door, keeping my voice steady. I told the man breaking the vents would kill everyone, including his group, because the shelter would become useless. I told the man we would share information about other shelters, but we would not accept a group that large. I told the man we could trade food and water in small amounts. The man laughed and said trade was over. The man said he was done begging. The man said open the door or he would smash the intake box and seal us inside until we suffocated. Earl whispered that he could shoot through the door if the man started damaging the vents. Shooting through a door is risky. Bullets do unpredictable things. It could hit the wrong person. It could ricochet. It could also escalate into a firefight outside. A firefight outside could damage vents and kill us anyway. I made a decision that felt cold. I told the man we would not open. I told the man if he damaged the vents, we would respond with force. I also told the man the shelter had multiple exits, and the man would not trap us. That last part was a bluff. The cellar did not have multiple exits. The man did not know that. Bluffing is not heroic. Bluffing is survival when you lack leverage. The man paused. Then the man started moving around outside. We heard scraping sounds near the vent area. The intake airflow changed slightly, which meant the man was close to the pipe. My heart hammered. Leon moved the kids farther back. Devin gripped a metal bar. Hector held his breath, listening for the exact moment the vent got hit. A sharp bang hit above us, then another. The intake pipe vibrated faintly. Dust fell from the ceiling beams. The man was hitting the pipe or the filter box. Earl raised his rifle and whispered, asking if he should fire. I said no, not yet. I said wait for a clear breach. If the man was just pounding to scare us, firing could turn a bluff into a war. If the man broke the intake, we would have seconds to minutes before air quality dropped and panic surged. I hated the time pressure. The man had chosen the perfect threat. Hector moved to the door and shouted through it, telling the man to stop, then offering a trade that had more weight. Hector offered 2 sealed water jugs and a bag of flour and canned food if the man left and never returned. Hector said the offer would expire in 1 minute. Hector said if the man hit the vent again after the minute, Earl would shoot. Hector did not sound excited. Hector sounded calm and final. Silence outside for a few seconds. Then the man shouted back, asking how Hector could prove the supplies existed. Hector said we would slide them out through a crack in the door after the man backed away to the noise traps. Hector said if the man approached early, we would pull supplies back and treat it as an attack. The man hesitated. A second voice outside, a woman, argued with the man. The woman said damaging vents was stupid. The woman said take the supplies and move on. The man cursed. Then footsteps moved away from the vent area. The rattling noise traps sounded again. The man had backed away. We did the trade fast. Devin and I slid supplies out through a small door gap, keeping the door mostly closed. The man grabbed them and moved away. The man shouted one last threat about returning with more people. Then the voices faded. When the footsteps vanished, I felt my hands shaking. I sat down on a crate and stared at the dirt floor. Trading away supplies to prevent a vent attack felt wrong. It also kept us alive. The truth is simple. Underground shelters are not castles. Underground shelters are fragile machines that require air and water and discipline. People who understand that can threaten you with a stick and a pipe. That encounter forced another decision. We could not keep paying off every hostile group that discovered us. Supplies would run out. We needed deterrence, not bribery. Deterrence in this world means making the cost of attacking higher than the reward. The problem is the reward is heat and water, which is huge. That makes people willing to take risk. Hector proposed moving deeper into the rural areas, finding a second cellar, creating distance from town. Devin opposed, saying moving again would kill the sick and the kids. Leon supported Devin. Leon said Mark could not handle another long exposure event. Jenna said she could not make the kids walk again in below zero temperatures. Earl said staying meant fighting off groups until one group got lucky. Earl said leaving meant dying on the road. Earl said both options were bad. I decided to stay but adjust. We would reduce visible surface signs. We would bury the vent pipes lower with makeshift protective covers to make sabotage harder. We would create a decoy vent pipe farther away using scrap metal, drawing attackers to the wrong spot. We would also establish a set of fallback caches nearby with water and food in case we needed to flee fast. That way, the cellar would not be our only lifeline. If someone breached it, we could move short distance to another prepared spot rather than sprint blind into ash. We worked on those defenses over the next week during visibility windows. Tasha and Devin built the decoy with scrap pipe and flashing, making it look functional from a distance. Hector and I reinforced the real vent area with a metal grate bolted down using concrete anchors we scavenged and set in the dirt. Earl built a simple tripline alarm near the approach path, using fishing line and small bells. The bells were quiet. Underground quiet makes quiet sounds loud. Life did not get easier. It got steadier. Steady is not comfort. Steady is knowing what pain is coming and managing it. Mark stabilized but remained weak. Pete recovered from dizziness and started helping again. The sick wave passed for some, took others. An older woman, Marcy, developed pneumonia and died after 3 days of shallow breathing, even with Leon's care. We wrapped Marcy and moved her to the cold exterior trench we dug outside the cellar door, using the frozen ash ground as a temporary holding place, away from our living air. We could not bury deep. The ground was too hard. We marked the spot with a piece of wood, and Lila wrote her name. The world above kept changing. The ashfall eased some days, then surged. Snow came in thin bursts. The light stayed weak. We heard distant structural collapses sometimes, a deep rumble in the night, then silence. We heard gunshots a few times from town direction, spaced out. That told us conflict had escalated. We did not go check. Curiosity kills. One evening, Sean approached me quietly and asked if I ever regretted refusing that family with the sick kid at the cellar door earlier. Sean asked in a flat voice. Sean did not accuse. Sean asked because guilt eats people and Sean was trying to manage his own. I told Sean the truth. I regretted it every day. I also knew taking everyone meant killing everyone. I told Sean that in disasters a person can do everything right and still hurt someone. I told Sean regret does not change the math. Regret only changes whether you can sleep. Sean nodded and walked away without saying thanks. That was fine. This was not a story where the right words fix anyone. At some point, maybe 3 months after the eruption, I stopped counting days. Lila kept counting because records matter. I lost the habit because the calendar felt useless. The season outside had stopped behaving. Winter was not a season now. It was a condition. Cold and ash and weak light. That condition might last longer than any of us. I still tried the handheld radio during quiet nights. Most nights were static. One night, a clear voice came through from far away, maybe across the plains, maybe down in Colorado, talking about crop failures and transport collapse and riots at distribution sites. The voice sounded controlled, still reading a script. That meant some official system still existed somewhere. That also meant the system was not reaching us. Another night, a different voice came through, a man speaking in plain terms. The man said his group had moved into a mine entrance in Montana and sealed it with heavy doors. The man said the mine had good ventilation shafts and stable temperature. The man said the mine group was armed and turning away outsiders. The man said any wandering group should stop trying to reach cities and should find underground spaces with water. The man's advice matched our reality. The man did not offer rescue. The man offered a warning. That was the kind of truth that still existed. I thought back to the bakery radio days when I believed a voice could connect people and coordinate. A voice still matters, but not in the way I wanted. A voice now is mostly proof that someone else is still breathing somewhere. That can help you keep going, even if it does not bring supplies. I am recording this now from the cellar because I do not know how long we can keep this place. The vent clog rate is increasing again. The cold is deep. The well water still flows, but the pump handle stiffens more each week. That might be ice in the pipe or wear in the seals. If the pump fails, we lose our main edge. We have backup water stored, but stored water runs out. Hector is working on a plan to insulate the wellhead and build a windbreak to keep the pump area from freezing hard. Devin is working on a second intake filter box to increase airflow. Leon is teaching people to recognize early respiratory failure signs and to rest before panic sets in. Jenna keeps the kids on simple routines and keeps their hands clean with the last of our soap. Earl keeps watch and keeps the outside approach trapped and noisy. Lila keeps writing names and dates and what happened because somebody should remember. I do not know if anyone hears this. I do not know if my handheld radio transmission reaches anything beyond a few miles. I do not know if those miles contain living people. I still talk because it keeps my head straight. It keeps me from turning into an animal in a hole. If you are out there and you are deciding between staying in a known building and moving toward a rumored safe zone, I will tell you what the last months taught me. The only safe zones are the ones you can control with air, water, and rules. Distance kills. Crowds kill. Machines fail. Fuel ends. People become threats when hunger reaches a certain point. The ground stays. Water stays if you can access it. Air stays if you can protect your intake. I am not going to dress this up. Part of me still wants to stay in the bakery in my head because that place felt human. Another part of me knows the bakery would be a tomb now. The cellar is not comfort. The cellar is a tool. Tools require maintenance. Tools fail. The decision I made to move underground and commit kept more people alive for now. It also forced me to turn people away and trade with threats and watch sickness take neighbors. Both can be true. Both live inside the same choice. Tonight I will go outside for 1 minute to clear the intake screen again. I will do it slow. I will do it with a respirator. I will do it because air is life and life now depends on chores that never end. After that, I will come back into the dirt and sit near this radio and listen for any voice that proves someone else is still here.